right, so how could I choose the Panasonic S5 over the Sony FX30? If I was coming from a Sony camera, like I was using the A6400, like how could I possibly decide to go with the Panasonic S5 instead of this amazing new Sony camera, this cinema camera? I'm a filmmaker. Like how could I choose the S5? And I mean, the S5 is an incredible camera. You know, it's very, very capable, but I came from Sony. I had all these Sony lenses. I mean, is it just because it was full frame? You know, I mean, am I tired of the crop sensor camera, even though I know full well it doesn't make any difference at all? Not in the images that I'm getting, you know, not in the storytelling that I have to do. Like, why would I go with the Panasonic S5? Well, honestly, the reason I did it was because I was curious. I mean, personally, I think that almost every camera that's come out over the past few years has been like off the charts incredible. Like an amazing camera that can pretty much do anything. I mean, I don't think there's anything that you really can't do unless you're like on a set and you need time code, or you know, you're really on a professional set with a lot of other people and you need a full-size HDMI, you know, stuff like that. I mean, I don't think there's anything you can't do with most of the cameras that are out today, you know, that are over, say, $700, $800. I mean, there are Sony cameras that are incredibly capable that you can get for $500, $600, $700. You can get a brand new Sony A6400 for $700 now. I mean, that camera is ridiculous. The autofocus, the picture profiles, the dynamic range, like it's an incredibly good tool, a creative tool. It's amazing. And so honestly, the reason I went with the S5 is because I was doing all this research, you know? Like, I am working on a film. I needed a second camera for the film. I'm shooting 95% of it all by myself. I just shot a film with my phone, by the way, but I only had one angle. And I wanted to add to this film. I wanted to kind of up my game, you know? I wanted to take it to the next level for myself as an artist. And so I knew I wanted to get another camera. So at first I was thinking, I'm just going to get another A6400 so I'll have the same camera and I can match everything. But then I'm thinking, I can match any camera pretty much. You know, I'm not trying to pixel peep, and you know, I'm not thinking that if I use two different cameras it's going to look that different, that it's going to, you know, people are going to watch and go, oh hell no, I can't look at this anymore. That's not going to happen. And so then I was thinking, you know, but there are certain things that I need. Like I really, really want to have a camera that has better stabilization than zero stabilization, which is what the Sony A6400 has. It's got no stabilization. I have a really good gimbal. I got the Weebill S, but I don't like using it that much. You know what I mean? Like if I have to use it for a shot, if I absolutely need to use a gimbal, then yeah, I'm very fortunate to have it, you know? But my style of shooting, my style of storytelling, my style of filmmaking doesn't really lend itself to gimbal use all that much, you know, all that often, you know? So I wanted something that had good stabilization handheld. And so I started to think about these Panasonic cameras. And honestly, the thing that really kind of got me thinking was I saw an advertisement for the GH6. And I was like, wow, this camera sounds like it's got everything, you know? I could shoot in high frame rates in 4K, anamorphic mode. I mean, it just seemed like it really was a filmmaker's tool at the highest level. Even though I had never used a Panasonic camera before, I had never worked micro four thirds. I was using a crop sensor camera, which is the A6400, so it piqued my interest, you know? But it was a little bit more money than I wanted to spend, because I also realized that I had to get lenses for it. And so I didn't really want to spend $3,000, $4,000, because if I was going to spend $3,000 or $4,000, honestly, I was definitely going to stay with Sony, and I was going to get an A7S3 or an FX3, without a doubt, because those cameras have decent stabilization, and they're like, you know, obviously a much higher level than what I had, A6400, which I've now mentioned like 12 times. But you know, if I wanted to spend $4,000, $4,500, something like that, even $3,500 if I found an incredible deal, I would have stayed with Sony. because I didn't really care about the brand or anything like that. I'm not sponsored by anybody. Nobody cares about my channel in the filmmaking world. So I'm just thinking about what's going to help me make this film. So then I started to think about the A6600, which is kind of like an A6400, only with stabilization, with in-body image stabilization, IBIS. But from what I read and from what I've watched in videos, it's not all that good, you know? And so really the only advantage to the A6600 was a bigger battery and some stabilization. But it didn't seem like it was really going to help me. And frankly, it wasn't really that inexpensive. You know, it was still going to cost me like $1,200, $1,100, $1,200. If I went to eBay, maybe I could find one for $1,100 used. But it was still going to cost me $1,100 or $1,200. And so at that point, I should just get another A6400 and use my gimbal. But I just kept looking and looking, and then I started to find these videos about the Panasonic S5 by a few YouTubers who I really respect and really admire. And I was like, this sounds really interesting to me, and the price was ridiculous compared to going with a full-frame Sony camera, because the S5 is a full-frame camera. And so I'm looking at these videos and I'm reading all this documentation. I'm like, damn, it's supposed to have class-leading stabilization because it's Panasonic. And, you know, some people say not quite as good as the GH5 or the GH6, but really good. And full frame, anamorphic mode, higher frame rates in 4K, you know, cinema 4K, time code, HDMI. I could shoot even higher frame rates if I want to get a Ninja V, you know, a Ninja 5, you know, external monitor for the camera. And so I was like, wow, I got to start thinking about this Panasonic S5, which kind of scared me because it took me all this time to learn to really master the Sony camera that I have. And I feel like, you know, with regards to the, you know, the menu system and stuff like that, I could use my Sony camera like it's like the back of my hand. Like I know how to use it. It's become like a part of my body. It's like when you learn an instrument, you know, like playing the guitar or playing the piano, you kind of become one with that instrument. I really know that camera and I love that camera. And I also finally learned how to use S-Log 2. Like really learn how to use it. And so my images, it almost felt like I got a new camera when I started to really work with S-Log and get out of, you know, I still use Cine 4 sometimes. And this YouTuber, James Matthews, provided these settings in one of his videos, and I used them on my camera. And man, that gave me the most incredible image right out of the camera. And so I'm really happy with the Sony, and I'm not giving up my camera, A6400. But like I said, I wanted to get a second camera. And so then it started to become about like price, because I started to really feel like, you know what? This S5 is for me. Like this is what I want. This is what I need. This is what's going to help me make the best project that I can make. And also, I'm going to go to another camera brand, new menus, new lenses, new color science, new everything, you know, new picture profiles, like the whole thing. I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to grow. I've always been interested in working in anamorphic mode because I really love the way that looks. This provides me that opportunity in the camera. And so I started to really kind of hone in on the S5. And then it became about the price. And when I saw some of the prices, so a funny story is I actually put an S5 in my shopping cart at B&H because it came with the 50mm f1.8 lens and the Ninja 5 external monitor for, I think it was $1,900. And I was like, it comes with all that? Plus some other stuff too. I put it in the shopping cart. But I was still doing research and I was still a little nervous, and I waited too long and the deal went away. And it was partially because, you know, B&H doesn't function on holidays or, you know, Friday and Saturday because of the Jewish holidays, because they're owned by religious Jewish people. So I just let it go for too long and the deal was gone. So I was like, damn, maybe that's the universe telling me to get the Sony. you know, because the Sony FX30, which is what I was really interested in as well, was basically the same price as the S5. And I had lenses for the Sony, so I wouldn't have to buy any more lenses. I have my gimbal, I pretty much had everything. I could just plug in this camera and go. But I was really interested. The S5 had, excuse me, more capability, you know. It just did more things. It's not better necessarily, but it's just different. You know, it's full frame, it's got anamorphic mode in the camera, and it's got a different color science that I was really interested in. And it's got stabilization. Now the FX30 is supposed to have really good stabilization too, but I don't know. In my head I was thinking Panasonic, probably better stabilization than the Sony. That's pretty much what everybody said across the board. So I was really interested in it because of that. So I found another deal at Adorama, and this time the camera was coming with, it was the S5 coming with the 50mm f1.8, a backpack, an SD card, an extra battery, a small tripod, a really good tripod. I was like, yo, how much could this cost? And it was $1,690 for everything. Brand new S5 and all these accessories and a lens. And then I saw that I could get a 20 to 60 kit lens, which everybody loves for the Panasonic, for like 250 bucks at MPB. And you know, I'm using all these names. I'll leave the links in the description of this video for everybody. But you know, as you get into this camera world, you start to learn where you can find things at good deals and which companies are reputable. Now, I've had some issues with MPB in the past, but I've also gotten some great deals from them. So I don't want to say anything bad about them. I'll just say, you know, you never know. But generally, they're definitely reputable, and I think they're cool. So I had just one bad experience, well, two bad experiences with them, but not terrible, horrific experiences that I'm going to get into. And I've had more good experiences with them, and I keep going back because they have good deals. And you know, sometimes you don't want to deal with eBay. eBay is kind of like the wild, wild west, like it's a scary world. And although I have had great luck on eBay for years, sometimes for a big ticket item like a camera, I'm not sure, you know, like, I mean, I got my A6400 on eBay. I got some great lenses on eBay. I've gotten, you know, musical instruments on eBay. I've had a lot of good luck on eBay. I've certainly sold a lot on eBay, so eBay is cool. But anyway, I got the S5. I got it from Adorama. Showed up. I'm incredibly happy with it. I feel still a little kind of out of control because I don't have a handle on it like I do the Sony, and I'm shooting this film, so I'm really hustling, like I'm making sure that I use it every single day, like every single day. And I'm practicing, and I'm trying to really get a handle on Vlog, and you know, Vlog is a lot different than S-Log2 and Sony. Like, you're not trying to get your exposure by, you know, shooting 2 stops over like you do in Sony. Here, you're pretty much exposing things properly. So it's a lot different. And doing it in post-production, you know, once you have the files, is a lot different too. You know, that's the other thing. Now I can shoot in 10-bit. So, you know, I learned how to use DaVinci Resolve when I was working on my first film. And so now, when I put the files from this S5, these 10-bit 422 files into my computer, and I start messing around with it in DaVinci Resolve, I'm like, damn, like you could really stretch them out, and it is quite a bit different. And again, you know, the thing is, you know, if I'm being really honest about it, the stuff that I get out of my A6400, I can make it look as good as anything that I get out of this camera, definitely. It's just a little bit more flexibility in this camera, so you know, I don't know what that means. Like, I have more dynamic range in this camera, so I'm sure over time I will learn the benefits of what exactly that means. But for right now, everything that I want to get when I see something like a shot, you know, when I'm shooting a scene, when I'm creating something, when I'm making art, I don't feel limited by the A6400 or the S5. The advantages that I'm finding are the stabilization definitely is really dope. Like, it's really, really good. So much different than my Sony. But you know, I'm grateful that I learned on the Sony, because I really learned how to get that floating effect with no stabilization, and get those micro jitters out just by using my body kind of like a gimbal. But when I do the same thing with this camera, it looks like a gimbal, like it's really good. So I'm really happy with what I did. I'm grateful that I have something where I can just get some money together and get some anamorphic lenses and start to mess around with anamorphic mode. And I feel really confident that I have the right camera, the right second camera, which is going to become my A camera now for my film. So I have this, I have my Sony a6400, I have my LG V40 phone, which I'm definitely going to use in the film as well, because I shot an entire feature film on that phone and I love it. The camera in that phone is ridiculous. I mean, it's incredible. So the S5, the color science is definitely different and I love it, but it takes some time to get used to. It's a lot more saturated than the Sony. I find it to be a little bit more toward the red side. Not the red cameras, but the color red. Like, it's definitely more saturated, but once I figured out how to really, really lock in my white balance, everything's cool, I'm getting my exposure together, I'm getting my white balance together. I'm only using the dual ISOs in this camera, the 400. I'm using 640 and 4000 for my ISO, and that's it, because it's got a dual native ISO, which is better than my Sony that I have. But the FX30 also has a dual native ISO, so I would have had that in that camera as well. So I guess I say all this to say, I'm sure if I got the FX30, I would have been really happy with it, because I know that it's a remarkable creative tool. I also did want to make sure that I had a viewfinder, because I actually use the viewfinder when I work, and the Sony doesn't have a viewfinder, although you could buy one for it. But why? If I could have it built into the camera already. So I'm happy that I have a viewfinder, happy I have better stabilization, and I'm really pleased with what I did. And so yeah, I mean, I didn't really, the biggest reason that I did it was I wanted to move to another brand. Or I didn't want to move to another brand necessarily, but when I found that I was interested in this camera, it didn't stop me from going to another brand, another camera. And it also is not stopping me from using these two together. They're both great tools. And so I'm really happy. I feel like this is going to help me grow as an artist. It's kind of pushing my envelope a little bit of knowledge and, raising my learning curve. And also, I'm kind of proud of the fact that I picked up this camera and I was just able to use it. Everything I learned from first using my phone to make my first film, and then for a couple of years using the a6400, and now this, like, I know about settings, I know how to set it up, I know about framing, I know about all of it, certainly not, like, I'm not a professional, DP or anything like that, but I know enough to make a feature film that wins a bunch of awards. I know that. So I'm just really grateful that I was able to pick up this camera and actually use it right out of the box. And now I'm working on mastering it so that I can, do what the whole point is of owning these cameras, which is tell a story, communicate the best that you can in the most entertaining, creative, meaningful, disruptive kind of way. In my case, like, I'm a kind of a disruptive artist. And that's what it's all about, with any of these things. These microphones, these gimbals, these cameras, these lights, all this stuff. We're just trying to enable ourselves to tell the best story that we can possibly tell, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And so that's why I had the audacity to choose the Panasonic S5 over the Sony FX30. And I guess also over the Sony a7S3 and the FX3. Because again, those two cameras were really my first choices. Like, I could have gone with either of those, and I probably would have gone with the a7S3 because of the viewfinder. But if I did that, I would have had to spend almost 3 times as much money as I spent on this. Because even though they were both Sony, and I was going to be staying in the Sony ecosystem, I don't have any Sony full-frame lenses. And so one really great full-frame Sony lens, if I got a zoom lens, might have cost me as much as this Panasonic S5. So that's crazy. I mean, I got the Panasonic S5 and I have 2 lenses, and it still cost me $2,000. So anyway, That's all I want to say now. I'm starting to ramble. So that's why I had the audacity to choose the Panasonic S5 over the Sony FX30. But no shade to Sony at all. And I'm sure I'll own another Sony camera in the future at some point. But for now, for the next few years, this is my camera. And I plan on squeezing every drop out of it and getting the most out of it and maximizing the potential that this camera can add to my personal storytelling. And that's it. See you soon.